It's Monday night, and you know what that means. Jersey First is live right now on YouTube and on StreamYard, and it brings you the latest edition of Real Talk here on the 14th of March. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll tell you, I don't know about you, but it's so great to see it's still daylight after 7 o'clock right now, and hopefully warmer weather will be here a lot sooner than later, ladies and gentlemen. So I want to thank you all for joining us here tonight once again on YouTube as well as on Facebook Live via StreamYard. And you know, I am New Jersey's premier award-winning journalist, top 100 Latino via the Latino Spirit Online magazine for 2020, 2021, and now, of course, in 2022. And your favorite conservative, Fernando Uribe. Again, hope you had a wonderful weekend. A shout out to my dad celebrating his birthday yesterday. A very, very filling meal at Rumba Cubana in downtown Jersey City. A great restaurant, folks, and a great franchise overall. When you love good Cuban food at reasonable prices and big portions, and that's me, of course, because I love to eat. So check that restaurant out when you can. Again, hope you had a wonderful weekend. Certainly losing an hour of sleep, but folks, hey, when it's nice and daylight into late evening, that's a good thing. So again, I want to thank you all for tuning in from wherever and however you may be doing so. Of course, check out Jersey First on their website, www.jerseyfirst.org. That's Jersey, the number one, ST.org. Also, make sure you like Jersey First on Facebook and also follow them on both Instagram and Twitter. And last but not least, I want to give a shout out to my Rutgers men's basketball team, who again qualified for the NCAA tournament. They'll be fighting the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame coming up this Wednesday in the first round of the NCAA tournament. As we all know it, it's March Madness. So a shout out to all the haters that thought Rutgers wouldn't make it. And as a proud alumnus, both with multiple undergraduate degrees and multiple graduate degrees, I'm as proud alumnus as you'll ever find online. Ladies and gentlemen. So let me just have a little tea here for all the haters. And I'll tell you, it's great to be a Rutgers alumnus. So let's go Rutgers basketball during March Madness as it starts this Wednesday. Of course, you can tell I'm all giddy about it, folks. Of course, if you check me out on Instagram as well, at The Amazing Professor, and also on Twitter, ladies and gentlemen, at No Filter Uribe. That's at No Filter Uribe. You know I'm always talking about Rutgers basketball. And also on my Facebook, check me out there as well. Fernando Uribe. You can't miss me, folks, there as well. Ladies and gentlemen, part of the reason this show continues to be successful, and again, now partnering with Jersey First, is because I bring you, obviously, the best guests, all the guests that are in the headlines right now, exclusively you won't see anywhere else in New Jersey media. And of course, this week is no exception. My good friend, State Assemblyman Chris DePhillips joins us here tonight on Real Talk. Assemblyman, how are you, sir?
Fernando, great to see you, and thank you for having me.
I appreciate that. And folks, just a disclaimer here. Assemblyman DePhillips is obviously a big fan of the show. He's been on multiple times, and I know he's always a gentleman, even after a long day in the shark-infested waters known as Trenton, New Jersey, in the state legislature. The Assemblyman makes it a point to come on Real Talk with Fernando Uribe and talk about what's going on right now in New Jersey politics. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, if you're not familiar with the 40th Legislative District, of course, it's a very nice part of New Jersey in the northern section, of course.
You should come visit.
Yes, we'll have to grab lunch and or dinner. I'll have to meet the missus at some point, and we could definitely do dinner. It certainly covers multiple municipalities in Bergen County. Ladies and gentlemen, it includes Allendale. Shout out to my personal attorney, Carolina Cabello, living in Allendale. Franklin Lakes, Hohokus, Midland Park, Ridgewood, Waldwick, and Wyckoff. And also includes the Essex County Township of Cedar Grove, in addition to the Morris County municipalities of also Penagoquac Township and Riverdale, and also in Passaic County, which includes Little Falls, Pompton Lakes, Totowa, Wayne, and Woodland Park. A very diverse.
You got it down. You got it down.
To say the very least, folks. And certainly Assemblyman DePhillips joins us here tonight on Real Talk. Mr. Assemblyman, again, you're in the headlines right now. And breaking news, obviously, over the weekend. And, leave it up to New Jersey Globe to break news, because nobody else is doing that in New Jersey media. Let's be honest. Not Insider NJ, not NJTV. It's always, David Wallstein. Whatever we think about David, hey, New Jersey Globe is really.
He's out there. He's out there.
I would love to see his contact list on his cell phone, to say the very least. But Assemblyman, you did introduce articles of impeachment against Labor Commissioner Rob Asaro Angelo, and that was big news over the weekend. I got to tell you, Mr. Assemblyman, I've done my research on this guy. I wouldn't trust this guy to rearrange the medication in my medicine cabinet. What is going on with people like this being hired to be the commissioner of labor in the state of New Jersey?
Well, for anybody who needed an unemployment check during COVID, he wasn't their friend. So he completely failed to perform the duties of his office. He has still failed to open up the Department of Labor offices for any in-person assistance. We're now 2 years into COVID. I think a lot of people think COVID is now receding. He refuses to open up the offices. He has failed over the last 2 years to process and pay unemployment claims expeditiously. There are still loads of people in this state that haven't received their checks. In addition, he has completely delegated and in fact abdicated his responsibilities in processing these claims. And he's delegated that function to me and the 119 other members of the legislature to perform these duties. He's basically kicked himself and his offices to the curb and given us the responsibility to process these claims. And that is not our function. It's his function. He needs to open up the offices. He refuses to do so. I think there's arrogance about his positions on these issues. We've asked him to resign time and time again. He refuses to resign. So I've now taken frankly, the final step in introducing these articles of impeachment to basically, kick him to the curb. It's time for him to go.
I agree with you. I mean, again, for all of us that, have done our research on him, and so we know a lot of people, Mr. Assemblyman, throughout the state that struggled during COVID to even get an unemployment check, to even get any sort of assistance or even access to resources during this pandemic, which, by the way, it seems like the pandemic it's the midterms election. And all of a sudden, I don't know, COVID's gone, Mr. Assemblyman. And we'll get to that later because I really want to have a little fun here at the expense of the left in New Jersey that really politicized a lot of this pandemic. But it just seems that for whatever reason, it's really funny how the media in the state likes to pick and choose who they want to go after in state government, right? When it comes to like assemblymen, assemblywomen, or state senators for taking up certain causes, right? Your colleagues in the state Senate, such as State Senator Joe Panaccio, Michael Testa, others that have tried to stand up to the governor, that have stood up against incompetence and ineptitude in state offices, that's sort of met with some vitriol. Or it seems like the mainstream media here in New Jersey, more so the liberal media, doesn't really want to go after this. And again, kudos to David Wildstein for reporting on this, because I sort of browsed the newsfeed in the last 48 hours. Nobody else was talking about this. It seems like Uncle Dave, I don't know what he's thinking about. I know he's giddy that baseball's back and maybe his Mets will be maybe somewhat competitive. I don't know.
Let's hope. That's my team.
Well, I know. I mean, listen, I might have to wait to regrow hair for that to happen too. Who knows? But the bottom line is that whether it's Uncle Dave, right, or whether it's Insider NJ and Maxie Pizarro and the other clowns there, it just seems like this is a story that should be front and center on every news site in the state of New Jersey, and it isn't. And again, I love taking shots at my colleagues in this field because they're doing such a disservice to us, but more so about the fact that what you're doing, I think, represents tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of New Jerseyans that are just looking for some assistance during the pandemic. Listen, illegals get everything handed to them in New Jersey, but when it comes to taxpayers and citizens, they get the shaft. I'm sorry, Assemblyman.
Well, the illegals are getting $53 million in the new budget, so that's shameful. As for the governor, I think this Department of Labor commissioner is not serving the governor well. If the governor were to call me about it, I'd say he's not making you look good. You need to get rid of him. He's not serving you well, and he's certainly not serving the people of New Jersey well. So, I mean, I get texts and emails from people all over the state, especially in light of this new resolution that I introduced, and people still are owed substantial sums of money that make the difference between whether or not they can make their rent, their mortgage, pay their medications, et cetera. And this is shameful, and we need a change. And this particular commissioner needs to either resign or we'll move forward with impeachment.
Mr. Assemblyman, some people might call this semantics by you, or there's DePhillips there with an antic, and it's just, sort of some symbolic gesture. No, not at all. I would argue that, again, with some inroads that Republicans made in the legislature last November, and certainly a lot of discontent throughout the state, it's very possible, if not very likely, that I know someone like yourself, along with your your fellow Assembly running mate Kevin Rooney can reach across the aisle to Democrats
sure.
who still hold a majority, not the big majority that they have, but it's slimmer now, where I think you can maybe reach across the aisle and say, hey, listen, this guy's got to go. This guy is the poster child for ineptitude and incompetence. We can't keep him around. Let's stop playing politics. Let's work for New Jerseyans. I mean, is that the message I think that you might try to convey to your fellow assemblymen and assemblywomen across the aisle?
Well, I hope the message goes to the governor and he actually sits down with the commissioner and says, listen, you've had 2 years to get this fixed. Time's up. So yeah, if it goes to the floor, I would work my colleagues across the aisle for sure. I've got lots of friendships on the other side of the aisle, and I would implore them to do the right thing. And I think many of them know what the right thing is.
I'm with you. And I really hope that these articles advance. And again, in both chambers, and maybe the governor hopefully gives them, the heave ho. It'd be nice to see that. But if the governor is unwilling to do that, then let the legislature run the process. Let the legislature.
Well, there's some precedent here. There's some precedent. Last year, our caucus introduced a resolution to impeach the commissioner of the Department of Corrections. And 3 months later, he was gone. The governor listened and acted and asked him to move along, and he did. So there's some precedent here. So hopefully it'll be followed here as well.
And that was really egregious what was going on in the DOC, especially after everything we learned with the Enna Mahan facility that was under the microscope. So that was another embarrassment, I think, for Trenton and the governor. And certainly I think this should be, and even, again, I don't want to sort of compare and contrast, but this is equally as egregious here when it comes to a commissioner that directly affected hundreds of thousands of New Jerseyans that were looking for some sort of economic relief during this pandemic. So we'll wait and see. Again, kudos to you.
The point is after that impeachment resolution was introduced, the governor's people took notice. The governor did the right thing, and the commissioner, he didn't resign per se, but he disappeared. So
yeah, you know what?
Not Jersey style. He just moved. He moved along, and he was no longer in that position. So
no, I'm with you. Listen. I mean, you're right. He disappeared quicker than my Yankees do in October. I mean, that's what happened pretty much. I'm telling you. So I'm definitely glad to see that those articles were introduced. Let's hope that it really gets the attention, like you mentioned, that it deserves, Mr. Assemblyman, and then hopefully the governor takes notice and maybe just gives them the heave ho. Because again, as an educator, part of my livelihood is grading people, and I'll tell you right now, if there's anything worse than an F, that's what I would give Labor Commissioner Rob.
Well, and just one final note: there's no compassion there. The commissioner is showing no compassion to the people of the state that need these monies to survive. There's arrogance there, but no compassion. And there's no feeling for what some of the people in New Jersey have been going through over the last 2 years. And I think that is shameful.
I agree with you. And again, that arrogance comes from knowing that every 2 weeks that direct deposit hits for state employees like him. And it's really, really embarrassing. So again, I hope that your articles of impeachment really, really get the attention that it deserves, Mr. Assemblyman. Folks, it's 7:15 here on the East Coast. If you're just joining us live right now on StreamYard and on the Jersey First YouTube, here this evening joining me is State Assemblyman Christopher DePhillips on Real Talk via Jersey First. Mr. Assemblyman, obviously a few months ago, you won re-election along with your running mates in the Assembly and also in the State Senate. Republicans made some inroads, certainly getting 6 new Assembly people in there, and certainly getting a big State Senate seat down south to flip. And listen, I talked about this with different people. I talked about this with operatives such as David Perano, who's big in the governor's office. I also talked about it with Chris Russell, who's Jack Ciarelli's campaign manager. Assemblyman, one of the things I talked about all last year was that, again, listen, Democrats have a lot of advantages when it comes to the voter registrations, the apparatuses in the counties, the machines themselves, not the devices, but the county parties. They just mobilize really well. And I knew that because of those things, I kind of gave the governor the edge. I said, hey, I think the governor is going to win by the skin of his teeth. It's going to be a lot closer than people think. And people laughed at me. I got so many DMs and emails. And guess what? I got a lot of free dinners coming my way. Because I was bets.
But you were right. You were right.
The fact is Republicans were able to galvanize a lot of anger in different pockets of the state. And I think that polling we've learned is not reliable. We learned this going back to 2016. The fact is that there were pockets of the state that were very unhappy with the governor. And it showed on election night, where it took, again, not until I think Wednesday night or Thursday morning for the governor to sort of, breathe a sigh of relief. I think Republicans got the message out. We saw, 6 hours south on Route 95, in Virginia. It's a different world politically, but you started seeing from a national perspective that Republicans were making gains in Virginia and in New Jersey collectively. I think that's a message that I would argue can be carried over into 2022, where we all know the midterms, where it's funny where COVID doesn't exist anymore, right? It's the midterm elections. Masks came off in our schools. Public buildings don't require masks. It's like, whether it's, I mean, again, I'm not trying to make light of this, but I almost want to give like Vladimir Putin like the Nobel Prize in medicine because my man just ended COVID in the last 2 weeks. I don't hear about COVID anymore. It's crazy. But on a serious note, it's really, really astonishing now how, to some extent, Mr. Assemblyman, COVID got politicized enormously by the left in New Jersey. Some would argue maybe in the governor's office, some in the legislature as well. That's not going to be the case. They can't hang on this anymore. And I think Republicans, like they did in November, can make some serious strides in 2022. Where am I wrong in any of my analysis here?
No, I think a red wave is coming in 22. I think it's going to continue. We had gains in 21, as you said. We picked up 7 seats in the legislature. Great developments. I think 22 is going to be a terrible year for Democrats up and down the ballot, primarily because President Biden is cratering right now. Because of his general incompetence, inflation, gas prices, his inability to take on Putin. You mentioned Putin. And his inability to rein in the progressive wing of his own party. It's killing him. It's killing the Democratic Party. And I think you're going to see Republican gains in the House for sure. I think the House could go Republican. You're going to see pickups in the Senate as well. And then that's going to drop down to the state level, county level, and the local level as well. So, the state of the GOP is very strong in New Jersey, given what we just came out of in 2021. Even though Jack did not win, he produced wins for us up and down the ballot in New Jersey. So we have to give him credit.
Mr. Assemblyman, we talked off the air, obviously, and, I had Chris Russell on a couple of weeks ago here, the former campaign manager for Jack Chiarelli. I know he's managing the campaign for Mr. Healy.
Well, and he's all full disclosure. Chris has worked on my campaigns and has done a tremendous job.
No, he definitely has. But I think there are a couple of things to look at here from November. Certainly you winning re-election along with Kevin Rooney and your state Senate running mate as well. Congratulations on that. But it just seemed like there was a lot of disenchantment, a lot of anger against the governor, but it still didn't translate to what I would argue what should have been an enormous Republican turnout. And that just wasn't the case, right?
Yeah, very disappointing. 39% Republican turnout. If there had been something like 49%, we'd be talking about Governor Chiarelli right now. So the Republicans can blame themselves for Jack not becoming the governor, because if the turnout had been there, and could you have asked for a better candidate who was up and down the state, all over the place, helping all of us on the ballot in 21? So I feel like the party did let him down somewhat because the turnout just wasn't there. Now, the Democratic turnout was even worse because there wasn't a lot of love and interest in what the governor was saying or not saying, certainly not speaking to the tax burdens in the state or the lack of affordability in New Jersey. That was our message. That message won. But the turnout just wasn't there. And it was, in my opinion, it was a tragedy that the turnout didn't come out, because Jack would have been a fantastic governor. But as you well know, he's going to be back in 2025.
Yes, Jack Chiarelli did announce shortly after conceding that he will seek the nomination in 25. I mean, I think, Mr. Summit, I think we can make the case here that Jack is clearly the prohibitive favorite within the party. I know we have some other names, State Senator Michael Testa,
right.
State Senator Bramnick. I mean, there are names out there, but it seems like Jack, again, came really close. And if Democrats continue to sort of die on this hill on wokeism, and listen, I've talked about this repeatedly on this show for as long as I can remember. And again, I'm a pragmatist, though, Chris. Okay, and you've been on this show before, and when it comes to the dire situation we're living in right now, gas prices looking like, like really mediocre credit scores. Okay, you know what I'm saying? Like really, really bad credit scores. I mean, looking like we're seeing supermarket shelves looking abysmal. Again, inflation, as you mentioned. We're seeing the geopolitical impact of Sleepy Joe, obviously not even knowing that there's a war right now in Ukraine, probably. Who knows? But the fact of the matter is that it seems like progressives have hijacked the Democratic Party. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't care how this sounds to anybody. I don't care about pronouns. I don't care about bathrooms. I don't care about statues. I don't care about a lot of progressive nonsense. I think New Jerseyans, much like the country itself, is seeing the disaster that progressives have invoked in the Democratic Party. And I'll tell you right now, if JFK right now has to be rolling around in his grave, he wouldn't even recognize this Democratic Party today. But if Democrats want to die on this hill of wokeism and all this other stupidity, God bless you. But you're going to lose middle of the road voters. You're going to lose blue collar Democrats that keep getting you elected. And again, listen, next week here live in the regularly scheduled time of 6 p.m., I'll have Robert Menendez Jr., a House candidate, on the show. And here, Chris, here in Hudson County, it's as blue as Windex here, okay? I mean, that's just a reality. Republicans can make some inroads. They've made some voter registration, advances. But at the end of the day, where I live in CD8, it's as blue as Windex. Nearby you, with Josh Gottheimer, he seems kind of like a relatively, not an easy win. Most likely he can win that seat. A little bit, moving south a little bit. Bill Pascrell, if he's awake, he might win re-election, if someone wants to wake him up. Mikey Sherrill, it seems like right now might struggle. But you know what? In Central and South Jersey, collectively, that's not the case. And I think this is an opportunity where Republicans, let's be honest, I mean, they can find a way to fumble the football. They've done it before. But Republicans look really good right now to win House seats in New Jersey during these midterms.
Agreed. In District 7, I expect to pick up with Tom Kean. And in District 3, I would bet that we would have a pickup there. So we could have 4 seats instead of 2, which would be a big difference. So I expect gains. I mean, I think the redistricting process showed that we can be competitive at the federal level. And I expect that Tom Kean Jr., he lost narrowly last time. I expect him to come back strong. And if the district is even better now than it was before for him. So, and District 3 as well. I just think that's prime for our pickup there.
Chris, let me ask you about that district, because I'm going to have Ian Smith on later on this spring, as well as Mr. Healy. Listen, I've interviewed Ian before. We all know who Ian Smith is. He's become this sort of viral sensation. He's been on Fox News. He's been on Tucker Carlson. He's been on Sean Hannity. He's been on Newsmax. He's been at CPAC. He's been, again, this online sensation. And he's been fundraising. We know that Healy certainly is going to have a lot of the establishment Republicans on his side. Certainly a lot of the JAG donors are going to gravitate towards Healy. Again, I'm talking to a lot of people on the ground. There's a buzz about Ian Smith's campaign. But again, I'm not saying this to be a Debbie Downer or a buzzkill, but having a strong online media presence doesn't always translate to votes. And I think people 100%. Have to be made aware of that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, you need to have a ground game, right? You need to get the voters out. You need to have, it's like hand-to-hand combat. Social media, great, you can get your message out, but that's not the way tight elections are won.
I agree. And listen, and Steve Cush, who helped, orchestrate the unlikely win of Edward Durr last November, certainly is running the Ian Smith campaign. So you can't take him lightly. You can't take that apparatus lightly. But that's a very interesting primary, I think, to say the very least. And we all know that, as you mentioned, CD7 with Tom Kean. Listen, I was there a couple of weeks ago. It looked like a madhouse in Morris County. It seemed like that convention was sort of a borderline disaster. I know that over the weekend, the former Senate Minority Leader here in New Jersey won the runoff. But it wasn't without some, not controversy, but not without sweating it out a little bit. Does that bode well for Tom? Because, again, where it was looked upon as he was the clear prohibitive favorite, you have to win a runoff in Morris County where, for the most part, you'd think he'd win that rather easily.
Yeah, I think he's going to have some opposition from the conservative wing of the party. I mean, Tom has been a great public servant. He's really worked hard for the people of New Jersey. He's certainly worked across the aisle as well. I certainly think he's the favorite. But, he can be a better candidate listening to the other voices that are running. And I think that's why primaries can be beneficial. They can be productive. If a candidate who's not the conservative, more moderate like Tom, he can be educated by those voters and he can become a better candidate and a better representative in the end.
I agree with you. And again, historically, the opposing party tends to win the House during the first midterm election. There's been some exceptions, though, in recent memory. We saw in 2002 under President George W. Bush, where Republicans actually held the House and gained some seats. And in 1934, under President FDR, Democrats kept the House and gained some seats as well. But, historically, the opposing party tends to win. We saw that in 2018 under President Trump, right? The Democratic tsunami, where I'll be very honest with you, Chris, what I there are two words I don't want to hear on January 1st, 2023, and that's Speaker Pelosi. Let her go back to San Francisco. Let her get her Botox
She can
injection.
rip her speeches up over on the West Coast.
Yeah, let her get like her 57th booster shot and her 58th Botox shot and whatever else. But I don't want to hear Speaker Pelosi. I don't even want to hear those words uttered.
Republicans. Well, I think a lot of Democrats don't want to hear Speaker Pelosi either. So more mainstream Democrats, more moderate Democrats, like the moderate Democrats that live in this state. She's not a standard bearer for them.
No, I agree. And again, and as I have Robert Menendez Jr. on the show next week, I mean, I'm really going to talk to him and say, listen, you're in a county where it's very middle class, blue collar, working class Democrats, across the river in New York City, right? The Puerto Rican princess, AOC, that act plays well there. That doesn't play well in New Jersey. Like that sort of woke, socialist, economically illiterate type of House member, that doesn't play well in New Jersey, though, Chris. And I think that Democrats, again, have to sort of be careful about living and dying on this hill of, I want to be a leftist. I want to make sure I cater to the progressive wing. That's not going to get you votes. Again, it works in New York City, and that cesspool. It's not going to work in New Jersey.
We should remind Rob, and I think he knows it, that New Jersey is a moderate state. How do you spell Jersey? The answer is moderate. And moderate Democrats will do well in our state, and moderate Republicans that certainly have done well. But even in Hudson County, moderate Democrats have built that county, right? Yeah. And so, far left Democrats, are not the answer for the challenges in Hudson County or anywhere else in New Jersey.
I agree. I mean, it'll be very interesting to see what happens during this midterm election cycle. Again, I don't care if I hear the word Speaker McCarthy or Speaker Jordan. Either one's fine for me on January 1st, 2023. So we'll see. And also, obviously, making some gains in the United States Senate. Obviously, no Senate seats are up for grabs in New Jersey. We know across the river, Chucky Schmucky over there, Schumer most likely could win. But there are a lot of vulnerable Democrats in Senate seats all across the country. So that's definitely something to keep an eye out for.
Well, the candidates who will pay attention to pocketbook issues and affordability, like we did in this last race against Murphy, that's why it was so tight. The governor did not speak to affordability concerns. He didn't speak to taxation. Those are the things that, drive people to the polls. And that's why we almost won. But, next time we need to get over the finish line.
I'm with you. Speaking of the governor, last week, the governor unveiled his new budget. For someone who is a staunch fiscal conservative, probably the only fiscal conservative in New Jersey media, quite frankly, I almost threw up in my mouth.
Yeah, well, it's disgusting. Budget. Yeah, the budget's disgusting.
And again, listen, am I surprised about the governor wanting to cater to illegals? No. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of these leftist activist groups, like Make the Road New Jersey or the New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice, or all these other left-wing groups, seem to have the ears of legislators and also the governor's office, because they keep trying to acquiesce and coddle illegals and cater to them. I mean, we're talking about $53 million of a new fund, which, again, the governor's saying, it's only a one-time $500 check. No, most likely it'll keep happening. And that's the problem. I think there isn't enough outrage. And again, I talk about the disservice the liberal media does here in New Jersey, right? We talk about Insider NJ. We talk about the clowns that work there. We talk about Uncle Dave with NJTV. This should be front and center. Why does spending go up like a temperature gauge in the middle of the summer? It's mind-boggling to me, Chris, that there isn't more fiscal sanity in Trenton. And again, I have to fault a lot of, leftist Democrats in the legislature that seem to sort of be embracing this and not trying to rein the governor's spending in. We have a new Senate president, but it seems like Nicholas Scutari, again, I'm looking forward to interviewing him, but it seems like Scutari and the others don't want to rein the governor in when it comes to spending.
Well, I think they want to. The question is, will they have the courage? The budget is reckless, irresponsible, $49 billion budget. I haven't been in the legislature that long, 4.5 years. When I got here, the budget was $34 billion. We're talking 4 years. Now it's $49 billion. Staggering increase. You're right. Trenton is addicted to taxes and to spending. It's all about getting these programs out to their constituencies to help them in elections. So you would think the budget would have been different after the last election that the governor just went through. But, frankly, the budget should be going down with all the federal money that the state has been receiving. Tax collections are way up. over the last year, primarily because the corporate business tax is so high in New Jersey, which is driving jobs and job creators out of the state, not to mention the billions that the governor borrowed in the last budget. The budget should be going down, not up. And that's been my message as chair of the Tax Cut Caucus in the Assembly.
Chris, we mentioned about that irresponsible $53 million to illegals. I mean, again, I'm just horrified at it. I know you just outlined some other things. What are some other items that concern you as well in the budget? I mean, I'm not sure if you've had a chance to read all through it. I mean, it's
still pouring through it. I'm still pouring through it, but there's just not enough taxpayer relief. These monies should be going back to the taxpayers. We're swimming in money in New Jersey. Federal money, the borrowing, the tax collections are up. The money should be going out the door back to the taxpayers, not to new programs, that would benefit, the governor's constituencies. So, that's my focus, is reducing taxes, reducing spending, and getting taxpayer relief out the door. Now, there's a proposal in the budget for some tax relief, but it's not enough, and that certainly needs to be increased.
Chris, just to educate us a little bit here on the show, and folks, if you're just joining us right now, it's 7:30 on the East Coast, live here on the Jersey First YouTube and also on StreamYard. State Assemblyman Chris DePhillips joins us here on Real Talk with Fernando Uribe. Chris, obviously, gas prices it feels like I'm going to have to donate a kidney just to fill up my tank, for God's sakes. I mean, last summer, $20 filled up my tank. Today, $20 barely gets it to half. So is there any chance that the legislature might sort of re-examine the gas tax, maybe trying to roll it back and get rid of it because of what's going on? Or is that just a fixture that won't be going away?
I don't know if it's going to happen. Certainly there's pressure there. We're still new, early in the term. So I sit on the transportation committee now, which is, I'm really excited to be there, but this issue likely will come before us. So I'm not sure yet if that has legs, but there's some movement afoot to give the residents a gas tax holiday. I don't know if that has legs, so we shall see. But we started this broadcast talking about the unemployment checks that have not been going out to the people in New Jersey. Can you imagine now those who have not received those checks, and on top of that, the gas prices that they have to endure to go out and look for work, right? And they still haven't gotten their unemployment checks, but the gas payments that they're going to have to pay while they're looking for a job. So it is a crisis for sure in our state and in the country. I don't see a lot of leadership at the federal level on how to deal with this. But I'll do my best on the transportation committee to address these concerns. Again, these issues of the gas tax prices, it gets back to affordability, right? We need to produce a state for our residents that's affordable, that can keep them here, can give their children hope to put roots down here, to stay here in New Jersey. So that's what it's about. It's about fighting for our future.
I'm with you, Chris. And one of the things that really, really just upsets me, I mean, again, when we look at the budget, we look at about just it ballooning up, more programs either being created or getting money funneled into them. I'll be honest with you, again, going back to that $53 million, I mean, I don't know who gets coddled more, a Kardashian or an illegal in New Jersey. I think it's kind of neck and neck there. When it comes to this sort of just ridiculous acquiescing that the left believes in here in New Jersey, it's
right.
really, really disappointing. And I think that moving forward, I mean, we're hoping that Democrats across the aisle can maybe shave something off this budget, but that seems highly unlikely though, right?
I think there's some moderate voices in the Assembly on the Budget Committee. They have pushed back on the governor's budgets at different times in the past. Not enough, for sure. But we'll see how the process plays out. But I'll be certainly part of that process and pushing for fiscal sanity for our residents.
Speaking of, again, sticking with Trenton, I know that here after the redistricting commission, it said a lot of, it said some ripple effects, at least where I live in Hudson County. It completely, sort of readdressed districts 31, 32, and 33 collectively. What impact did it have for the 40th and nearby, the 38, 39, 40 by you? Was there as much of a sort of a overwhelming seismic shift like there was here in Hudson County?
We lost some towns and we gained some towns. Passaic County, part of the district, largely intact. We lost one town, picked up another. In Bergen County, where I live, We lost 4 towns that went to our neighbor district in District 39, Senator Shapizi and her colleagues. And then we picked up a number of Essex County towns. That part of the district will be expanding. But net, it's still a very good district for us and a very good district for Republican representation.
Well, listen, that's good to know. And again, great towns for sure in the 40th. Chris, before I let you, I know you've had a long day, but moving forward, obviously, whether it was in our public schools, we saw what the governor enacted just a couple of weeks ago on March 7th in the elimination of mask mandates in our public schools, a lot of state buildings. I found that to be just a lot of semantics as well, where if the governor was making this announcement in February, waiting until March, I mean, if it felt right in February, why drag this out? It seems like a lot of COVID has been politicized, and I'll be fair about it. I think there's some guilty parties on the right and the left. I mean, again, I'm intellectually honest on this show, and I'm also philosophically consistent, where I tend to sort of go after both sides. But it just seems like on the left in New Jersey, though, Chris, they really milked this when it came to COVID and masks and the detrimental effect it was having on our children.
Well, listen, my youngest is 14. I gave her the good news on February 7th that the mask mandate was going to be lifted. And of course, she said, "That's great. I don't have to wear a mask to school tomorrow." And I said, "Yeah, you do, because it's going on for another month." And I called immediately for the governor to put that into effect immediately. It stayed with March 7th. So it made no sense to me. There was no science behind it, making the kids wait another month after being masked for the last 18 plus months in school. Special needs children being masked for another month for no scientific reason. I called on the governor to lift the public health emergency that day and not wait another month. He waited another month. So again, elections matter. If I had been on the phone with Governor Chitterelli, I'm sure the response would have been different.
Moving forward for 2022, Chris, obviously, I know you introduced the articles of impeachment. What other pieces of legislation are you really interested in putting forward and really sinking your teeth into in this next legislative session?
I reintroduced my bill to cut the corporate business tax in New Jersey over a 4-year period from the highest in the nation to where it is with North Carolina, 2.5%. It is not an accident that jobs and job creators are moving their families to North Carolina. I get calls all the time about people in my district. "Oh, we're moving. Guess where? North Carolina." So we need to become competitive with North Carolina, South Carolina, Indiana, Arizona, all of which have lower corporate business taxes than we do. That's why, people wonder where the job's going and where the company's going. They're going to places where the corporate business tax is not there to buttress the state budget. It's there to incentivize businesses to create jobs. So that's number one. I have other bills. I have a bill that would increase from 18% to 30% of the amount of rental payments that tenants can deduct from their income taxes. So it's not just homeowners that need property tax relief, it's tenants as well. And I'm pretty sure that's going to get posted on the board in the assembly at some point soon. There's definitely bipartisan support there. Tenants should receive property tax relief as well as homeowners. So I expect that to be passed in the coming weeks.
I hope so. I mean, again, and that sounds like a great sign of relief for a lot of New Jerseyans, undoubtedly.
Yeah.
Chris, a hot topic last week in all the news feeds and social media was the idea about maybe New Jersey might let people like me that love to pump their own gas make it a law. Now, again, a lot of polling has told us that I believe 7 out of 10 New Jerseyans do not want to pump their own gas. I think that's lazy. I love pumping my own gas. I think it's simple. This is not AP calculus, folks. This is not trigonometry. It's not difficult. Why so much opposition, Chris, to pumping one's own gas, especially when now again, I haven't looked at the bill exactly per letter, but was it being proposed that maybe a reduction or some sort of discount would be applied to motorists if they were able to do that?
No. So the bill is sort of a hybrid, that if gas stations have 4 or more pumps, that you would have to offer both the ability to have self-service and also to have your gas pumped for you. That's the bread and butter of that particular bill. But there is resistance to it, right? This is Jersey. We're the last holdout. culturally, New Jersey is all about full service gas. I mean, it's sort of part of our history.
Yeah.
I would say that 2 out of 3 people are opposed to it in New Jersey. It's going to come before the Transportation Committee, which I sit on. I don't know if it has the support. There are seniors who are opposed to it. Seniors don't like to pump their gas.
Understandable.
There are people with disabilities in New Jersey that don't want any part of it. I pump my gas all the time when I go to Rhode Island and Massachusetts, when I drop my kids off at college, do it all the time. It's not difficult to do. The question is it really going to save people money? And that part of it, the jury is out. So I think I need to see that. Like when I vote on it, I want to know if, we're going to move in any way, shape, or form to self-service. I want to see savings for the residents of the state. And to date, I have not seen that. So jury's out on that for me, but it's a more complicated issue than people realize, with the number of groups out there that simply want no part of it.
I'm with you, Chris. And listen, and again, when it comes to elderly motorists, people with disabilities, certainly having attendants that can do that, absolutely. That is totally reasonable. But able-bodied people in New Jersey, come on, stop being lazy. I'm very impatient, Chris. When I go get gas, and I know maybe in the morning, I have a very short commute, but when I have to go get gas and you know what, it's cold, I don't care. I'll go and run out and pump my own gas because, again, maybe there's a lot of people at the gas station. Maybe attendants are doing something else. I don't want to be honking the horn, being one of those annoying motorists. Oh, what's up? Nope. Give me my debit card, swipe in, swipe out, type in whatever amount I want. Obviously, it doesn't go as far as it used to, but I'd rather have that at my disposal.
Right.
Again, I've been doing a lot of road trips lately down to Florida. I love driving to the Carolinas, and down in Georgia, I love driving down there. And
right.
Even in Florida, I love going to a Wawa or wherever and just pumping my own gas and being on my way.
Listen, Jersey, Jersey is many things, but one thing about Jersey that is key is that we're a state of choice, right? The people of New Jersey love to have choices. So if you can go into a gas station and have that choice to do self-service or to do full service, I think most people would be happy with that. The question is, are there enough gas stations in New Jersey? There are a lot of mom and pops that don't have a lot of pumps, so under the bill currently, those people would not have to provide self-service because they're a mom and pop, they're a small entity.
Sure. Again, it's a topic that continues to generate a lot of debate. Another topic last week that was reported on, apparently there's going to be, I think for the full calendar year, the moratorium on licenses and either the fees for motor vehicle licenses, marriage licenses. I was reading that. Was that being proposed, Chris?
That has not come before me, so I have not seen that.
Okay, I did see it. I was like, wait a minute, wow. Like they want to make marriage licenses free. I'm like, I don't know if that'll really encourage people to get married in New Jersey just to make it cheaper, but we'll see. I did read that in a few different headlines that might be proposed in the budget. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'll have to check the budget on that. But I think people who want to get married, are not going to be holdouts because the marriage license costs, a certain amount of money.
And the same thing with the motor vehicle license. If you want to operate a motor vehicle, it's $24. Again, right. I'm not trying to sound arrogant, but if you want to drive, I don't think paying $24 is the end of the world. Again, right. It's like anything else. I did see in a couple different sites where, hey, nothing's ever free, Chris. And I think I love when people say, well, there's going to be free this and free that, so that fee's going to be waived. No, folks, that gets passed down to us some way, shape, or form. Case in point, the Community College Relief Act. On its premise, it sounds great in helping like sort of working class families, but someone's paying for it, okay? It's not free. It's government funded. It's not, it's taxpayer funded at the end of the day. So I'm always concerned when I browse social media and people say, oh, well, the governor or the state of New Jersey wants to do free this and free that. No, folks, again, I get it. A lot of you never took Economics 101, but the point is that nothing's ever free. It gets passed down to us in one shape or another. Is that fair, Chris?
Well, tuition is free for certain illegal immigrants in the state of New Jersey. And that to me, that is shameful, given the economic burdens that people are facing, residents, legal citizens are facing in New Jersey. So, but like you said, there's no free lunch except if you're a child in the DePhillips household.
Well, there you go. And there are a lot of kids in the DePhillips household, right?
There are four. There are four.
Wow. Okay. Well,
One's graduating from college. One is a senior in college. So we are finished with tuition for those two, and the others are coming up the ranks as well. So
congratulations,
thank you, sir.
to your children as well, Chris. Before I let you go here, obviously as we sort of look at the way the media landscape is, whether it's a midterm election this year, whether it's county elections, local municipalities, one of the things that's really alarming to me is just, I would argue, the ineffectiveness of what we've come to rely on when it comes to traditional media. Listen, I'm one of those guys. We're sports fans, right? I still love picking up the paper. I read it from the back to the front because I'm a sports guy. I read the box scores. But, tangible print newspapers are going by the wayside. People are relying more on their smartphones. Obviously, digital services for news sites have become the norm for as long as I can remember. But with that also comes, I think, the responsibility of being accurate and representing New Jerseyans and taxpayers. I would argue that, the apparatuses here in New Jersey are doing us a huge disservice. I don't want to sound like I'm trying to sort of be hyperbolic here, but we look at news sites that have been around for some time online, and they're just not focusing on topics I think that matter most. Again, whether it's the $53 million fund that the governor is trying to propose in the new budget, whether it's maybe not insisting on rolling back the gas tax, whether it's not trying to, hold the legislature's feet to the fire, especially on the left, when it comes to spending. It just seems like the media here again, and I mean, I love to pick on them because they make it so easy for me, whether it's NJTV, whether it's Insider NJ, whether it's the Star Ledger, the Star Liar, as I like to call them for some time, or NorthJersey.com. It just seems like these news sites have zero interest in really representing New Jerseyans. And again, they just continue with their own agenda and picking and choosing what to be outraged about. And I think it's virtue signaling on steroids, Chris. Am I wrong here?
Did you see the COVID briefings that the governor had for the last 2 years? Obviously, they're over now. But the mainstream media in New Jersey, I called him the Teflon governor, right? They never shot back at him on his COVID policies, on his economic policies, and nothing against him personally. I'm not saying they should, attack him personally. They should be challenging him on his policy choices. Any governor should be challenged. And they let him, I don't want to say get away with murder for the last 2 years, but there was hardly any pushback, any challenging of his policy perspectives at those briefings. And those were very difficult and challenging times for the people in New Jersey. People were losing their businesses. Businesses were going under. People were losing their homes, their jobs. Their children and their parents were getting COVID. I mean, it was a very difficult time. There was no pushback whatsoever. And not just, the social media sites that you're talking about where accuracy is not necessarily paramount. We're talking about traditional media outlets in New Jersey not challenging the leaders of our state. I'm an elected official. I expect to be challenged hard by reporters when, I introduce something or when I voted a particular way. I expect that should happen at all levels. But for whatever reason, I didn't see that for 2 years in those COVID briefings. And I don't know if it's part of it's laziness, not doing their homework and not researching alternatives, or just having the courage to challenge the governor. He's the leader of our state. And I certainly think he's up to the task to answer those questions. But, I agree with you. It's the media is in a weird place in this country right now. No more newspapers. You're singing my mother's song. She's 87 years old, and, no more newspaper at the front step. I mean, she's pretty savvy for an 87-year-old in terms of, working with her phone to get news. But it's not so easy for all seniors, and, they're cut off.
It's really disappointing, Chris. And again, listen, I love calling out my peers because it's so easy. They make it's like throwing me a softball down the middle of the plate where I can just call them lazy because that's what we've seen for some time. Chris, real quick here, transition to baseball. I know you're a big baseball fan. I know we were both delighted, I'm sure, last week to hear that the billionaires fighting with millionaires were able to come to an agreement, and we're going to have a baseball season. Obviously, teams reported yesterday to their respective spring training complexes. I got to tell you, Chris, and I'm sure you'll pick up on the humor here. I don't know about you, but as a baseball fan, I am just outraged about a certain team in New York just buying everybody and spending money and buying this guy and buying that guy. As a Yankee fan, I'm just outraged that we're not going to see any comparative balance. And some team across the river in Queens is just buying everybody now. That's bad for baseball, Chris.
Yeah. Well, I'm not taking the bait on that. All I know is that I was very confident that things were going to work out. You know why? Because the country was craving baseball, craving a regular season after 2 years of COVID, which affected all of us.
Yeah.
It's time to get back to normal. And what's more normal than baseball in the spring? I was very confident it was going to work out. I didn't have any intelligence along those lines, but I just felt that ultimately they were going to do the right thing. And, baseball was going to start in April. And so thankfully it happened.
Chris, I got to tell you, Uncle Stevie's spending a lot of money here, a little uncharacteristic for Met fans, right? After decades of the Wilpons. How do you feel about your New York Mets going into 2022?
I hope it's not going to be the same old, they start off pretty good, the midpoint of the season, they're looking good. And then the collapse happens in the fall. So I'm hoping for a different kind of season.
Well, I have nothing to look forward to. My Yankees look about as inept as the labor commissioner. Let's be honest. I mean, that's just the truth. And I'm a diehard Yankee fan, as you know. Chris, thank you so much again for joining us here. You're always a gentleman, and I really appreciate your faith in this show. I know you've been one of the guests that's been on consistently since its inception in June of 2020. I really appreciate the time that you take to talk with me. And again, one of the few conservative journalists that is fair and is very, I think, objective when it comes to talking about issues and policy prescriptions that New Jerseyans, I think, at the end of the day, really want to talk about. So I want to thank you for that and your faith in the show and your support of Real Talk now with Jersey First. And I'll give you the last word, Chris.
Yeah, I'm going to watch next week when you have Rob. Is it next week on Rob Menendez?
Yep, next Monday at 6 p.m. Yep.
Yeah, so I think that'll be good for you and certainly be good for the people of Hudson County to hear what he has to say about his run. But I think it might bode well for you to get some more moderate Democrats on your show because I think that, that can only, bode well for your viewers to get different perspectives, Democrats, Republicans. I'm pretty interested to hear what Rob Menendez is going to say. I've heard good things about him from being on the Port Authority board. So I think he has, a bright future, but, it's important to hear what he has to say and what he intends to do.
No, he'll be a great guest. And just not to give too many spoilers out there, but the president of Now will also be joining me on the show in a few weeks.
Great. That's great.
We'll be having some other journalists on. Especially on the left, so you'll be definitely interested in watching.
And I will. I'll go to bat for you and try to get my congressman, my neighbor over here, Josh Gottheimer, who's a moderate Democrat. See if he has the courage to come on.
Listen, I'm fair with everybody, Chris. So please get him on. And
you certainly are.
I appreciate your support of the show here on Jersey First and on StreamYard. Thank you so much for joining us, Chris.
Yeah, great to see you as always.
Take care, man.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right, folks. Great show here today with State Assemblyman Chris DePhillips. Again, a long day for him being in Trenton, driving up from there and joining us here live on Real Talk with Fernando Uribe. He's always a gentleman. I really appreciate Chris DePhillips because he's been one of the original, consistent guests on this program since I started in June of 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic, doing the show from home, again, as I've been still doing. But always a gentleman to answer my texts and my emails and look at his calendar and say, hey, Fernando, I want to come on your show and talk policy with you. He's always great about that. So, I'll definitely have him on later on this spring, if not the summer as well. See how the budget talks are progressing. And hopefully maybe we can shave some of the fat off this budget because, Jesus Christ, I mean, talk about irresponsible spending in Trenton. It almost becomes synonymous with the Garden State. So we'll see. Folks, again, I want to thank you all for tuning in here again on Jersey First via their YouTube page and also on StreamYard. As a reminder, you can check out the episode in its entirety right after the show goes off the air. Make sure also you share it on your social media. Don't forget to follow Jersey First on both Instagram and Twitter at Jersey First. Also, make sure you check them out on Facebook and like that page and check out their website, www.jerseyfirst.org. That's www.jersey1st.org. All I can say is for the lovely ladies that are in charge of Jersey First, Elizabeth, to Rosemary, to Audrey. I tell you, I love working with them. They've shown a lot of support for this program, and they've just shown a lot of faith in me and in my brand of opinion journalism, which is award-winning, by the way. At the same time, I'm so proud to be a part of Jersey First, and I look forward to contributing here every week, folks, once again. Now, again, we have a special start time tonight at 7 p.m., but the show will return in its regular time slot, again, on Monday night, 6 p.m. next week. So you definitely want to tune in, as we'll have CD8 House candidate Robert Menendez Jr. on the show. He's a good friend of mine, and we'll definitely be able to talk a lot about what's going on in this election cycle, his run for Congress in the House of Representatives, replacing the retiring Albio Ceres, what's going on with the Democratic Party, that and much more, obviously, next Monday night. Mark it on your calendars, folks, at 6 p.m. Eastern time here for the latest edition of Real Talk. Always remember, ladies and gentlemen, if it's unbiased, unfiltered, and unafraid, it's always Real Talk right here with Jersey First via YouTube and also on Facebook Live. I am New Jersey's premier award-winning journalist, top 100 Latino via Latino Spirit Online magazine for 2020, 2021, and now in 2022. And of course, your favorite conservative and also the most diehard Rutgers alum you'll ever meet, folks. Again, this Wednesday, I'll be glued to my television as my Rutgers Scarlet Knights will be playing in round one of the NCAA tournament. We're going dancing. Notre Dame, you're in for the fight of your life, because you know what? The Scarlet Knights, we're coming this Wednesday night on TNT. I believe it's 9 o'clock Eastern time. You definitely want to tune in for that game. So let's go Rutgers. Let's hope they have a nice deep run in the NCAA tournament in 2022. Yes, folks, it's me, Fernando Uribe, staying up for all of you every single week here on Jersey First. I'll see you next week here live at 6 p.m. Once again, joining me live will be House candidate Robert Menendez Jr. It's an episode you definitely don't want to miss. So I'll see you next time here, folks, on Jersey First and also on Facebook Live. Have a great weekend, folks, and also have a very safe and happy St. Patrick's Day later this week. We'll see you next week here on Jersey First, folks. I'm Fernando Uribe. Have a great week.